champion guitar players, today I show you 5 Phrygian dominant guitar licks in the aggressive neoclassical sound. So if you love that Yngwie sound that he creates when playing the 5th mode of harmonic minor, you'll love these killer Phrygian dominant guitar licks. Hi, I'm Tom Hess, and when I first learned how to play in harmonic minor, it did have that neoclassical sound, but I didn't know how to make it sound super aggressive. Then I discovered I can get that killer sound when playing in the 5th mode of harmonic minor, aka the Phrygian dominant scale. Now that changed everything, and suddenly the aggression was easy to create and it just sounded powerful. Now, I've taught this same stuff to many of my private online guitar students who want to learn this style, and now they're having a lot of fun doing this as well. Now, today, it's your turn. So grab your guitar and let's start having some fun. All right, let's check out example number 1. All right, so there you hear it. We've got basically 2 licks or 2 different techniques in one. We start off with a sequence of 4 on one string. So it goes like this. So that first measure is. Then from here, measure 2 is a classic pedal point lick. The vibrato on that last note is really important. Now, the tricky part is not measure 1. It's not measure 2. The trickiest part, probably for most people, and it certainly was for me, was the seam, the connection between measure 1 and measure 2. So going from this into was the tricky part. I could do each one independently, but putting them together was a little bit tricky. So if you find that to be difficult when you're doing that, if you have any challenges with that, my suggestion to you would be this. Play the last 4 notes of measure 1 and then play the first 4 notes of measure 2 and just practice that. Practice that in isolation, then go back and put the whole thing together. And when you do, I think it will be easier. Now, before we go further, I've got another video on YouTube. It's called How to Shred Guitar Speed Tutorial. So if you need some help with picking or some other things, you might want to check out that video. It will help you gain the skills to do some of the exercises and the licks we're doing in this video. All right, let's check out the next example. All right, so what we have there is basically it's a sequence of thirds. So what is that? If you don't know what that means, I'll tell you. It is basically, we've got a harmonic minor scale. And we're going to play the scale or sequence it in thirds. So we play the highest note. Then the next note would be here. We're going to skip that note and play this. So we're going from A to F. Okay. Then we're going to go back and play the note we skipped, fret number 16, or the G sharp note. Then we'll play the E note. So it's. Then the next 2 notes are F and D. Then E and C. So you hear the pattern. It's that pattern most of the way down. So there's a break from the pattern right at the end. If you look at the last 5 or 6 notes of measure 2, that's a break from the pattern. But the rest of it, everything before, is just a sequence of thirds. Now, the most important note here is the last note. So as you're playing this, if your timing gets off a little bit here and there or whatever, don't worry so much about fixing that until that final note sounds really good, okay? That note is the priority. Making the last note sound great will help make the whole thing sound better. And then once you've got the final note sounding the way you want it to sound, then go back and you can clean up the technical aspects of whatever was giving you trouble, if any part, in the lick. All right, so how are you doing so far? You like these neoclassical licks? If so, I've got another video on YouTube called 7 Neoclassical Metal Guitar Licks Shred Guitar Lesson. Might want to go check that out if you're looking for more cool licks. All right, now let's check out the next example. Okay, so this one is a fully diminished 7th arpeggio, okay? It looks and sounds harder than it is. It's not nearly as hard as what it might sound like or look like, okay? So basically we've got a diminished 7th arpeggio. Okay, and I'm doing a hammer-on in the beginning. Then a pull-off here. Then that same pattern, you just move up 3 frets. You play exactly the same thing. Then you move up 3 more frets and you play the same thing. Then you move up 3 more frets and you play the same thing up to the highest note. And then you stop. And then I'm playing, there's a rest there. And then I'm playing on my guitar the 25th fret. Now, if your guitar doesn't have 25 frets, no problem. Just play the 24th fret and bend up a half step quickly. So you're just playing 24 and bending up. If you've only got 22 frets, you can still play this. You play the 22nd fret and then you bend up. You've got to bend up a step and a half, but you can do it, okay? So all together. You can slide off or whatever. So that rest here, that staccato note, you play the note and you cut it off, is pretty important. And then you rest after it, and then you hammer on that highest note or bend up to it. Hit it hard, and it will sound really aggressive. All right, now let's try a completely different sort of example. All right, so what we have here is a pretty cool sequence. It's technically not exactly a scale sequence because we're not playing all 7 notes of the scale. We're omitting something, but it's like a scale sequence. So here is what we're going to do. Measure 1 is the first pattern. So let's try it up to there. That's the pattern. A little slower. Now, from this point, that same type of pattern is going to repeat an octave higher. It's not exactly the same fingering because we have the tuning of the B string, which is tuned in a third relative to the G string. So we've got to move up an extra fret, okay? Right there. And then the third measure, okay, now there is a little error. I apologize for the error. There's an error in the tablature and the notation for this example in measure 3. So you'll see that it says, I'll count off the frets, 9, 10, 12, 10, 12, 13, 12, 10. Then when we go back to the second string, the notation says, or the tab says to go 13, 12, 10. That's wrong. I should have written 12, 10, 9. The rest of it's correct. And as usual, the most important note here is the one that is being sustained and getting the vibrato. So the final note is the most important pitch of all. So I would prioritize making that note sound really good before worrying so much about the technical aspect of getting the pattern down, etc. And if you've been liking these Yngwie-style licks, I've got another video on YouTube called Effortless Neoclassical Guitar Licks. Those are pretty easy licks in the style of Yngwie. Not that Yngwie stuff is easy, but the licks in that video are easier. So you might want to check that out. All right, this next example is quite a bit more challenging than it looks. So when you're looking at the notation or the tab, it looks pretty simple, but at least for me, this is actually one of the hardest examples I'm going to show you. But at the end, I'll show you how to make this much easier to play. But right now, I'll play it the harder way, the way it's written. Here we go. Okay, so this is challenging because we've got what's called a backslide chain. So let me explain what a backslide is, and then I'll tell you what a backslide chain is. So a backslide is my term, a term I created just to describe what you do when you play a note, you slide away from it. Doesn't matter if you slide up or down, but in this case we're sliding up. And then you immediately slide right back to where you started. That's why it's called a backslide. You slide away, and then you slide back to where you began. And then there's vibrato. Then we've got the next backslide with vibrato at the end. So that's the start of our chain, our daisy chain of backslides. Etc. So you see that we go basically through parts of the scale, and we're sequencing these backslides into the backslide chain. And each backslide individually is not that hard. It's daisy chaining them together in time with the right phrasing and vibrato that makes it challenging, at least for me. All right, now here's what you can do to make this easier to play. And all we're going to do is just give ourselves more time in between each of the backslides. So instead of having 2 beats in between each backslide, we're going to give ourselves 4 beats. Okay, so it's not written this way in the notation on the screen, but all we're going to do is we're just going to do 1 backslide per measure instead of 2 backslides per measure. So this will make it considerably easier. All right, so let's see how that sounds. All right, so there you have it. It's definitely easier when you give yourself more time. Now, you might like that way better. You might like the sound better that way, or you might like the sound of the original where the backslides occur faster. They're occurring every 2 beats instead of every 4 beats. Your preference is your preference. I like them both, but I'm going to suggest to try practicing them with the backslides every 4 beats just to get used to it. And then when you feel comfortable, try it every 2 beats and see how it goes. All right, now let's talk about how do you practice these 5 killer Phrygian dominant guitar licks. Well, the main thing that, and I alluded to it earlier, the main thing to get that cool sound is not really technical in nature, but it's phrasing. So anytime that a note is being sustained, that's often the final note of the lick, or in the case of the backslide chains, it's the final note of every backslide. When you apply the vibrato, or if you're bending a string or doing a slide or whatever, you want to get the feeling, the phrasing of those notes to be as expressive as you can make it in whatever way you like. Okay, so your vibrato doesn't need to sound like mine. The way I slide, the way you slide doesn't need to sound like the way I slide. Okay, you don't have to copy what I'm doing. My examples for you are just suggestions. But I urge you to focus on the phrasing, the vibrato, the slides, more than the two-hand synchronization and the technique. That stuff comes later. Because if you have good phrasing and then later you speed that up, it's going to sound awesome. Okay, so when you listen to great neoclassical players, when you listen to someone like Malmsteen or Joe Stump or people like that, their phrasing sounds killer. So if you would take 80% of their speed away and listen to it in really slow motion, it would still sound awesome. It's not the speed alone that makes those guys sound awesome. It's their feel. It's the phrasing. That's what makes those guys sound awesome. Sure, they got great technique. Yeah, they play really fast. But without the phrasing, those guys wouldn't be the players that they are. So today we've been talking a lot about these Phrygian dominant guitar licks and making them sound good. And we just talked about phrasing, etc. And one of the problems that guitar players have when trying to play fast is that they play with way too much tension in their hands, their arms, all throughout their body. And tension kills guitar speed, at least in most situations. Now, there are 9 types of tension that guitar players typically suffer from. Some players have all 9 of these sources of tension. Others have less. Now, on average, after teaching thousands of students over many, many years, I can tell you that most guitar players have about 6. They have 6 different sources of tension, but are typically only aware of 1 or 2. So part of my job in helping them is to help them identify all the different areas in which they have sources of tension and then work to help them eliminate those things. And that's what keeps people stuck, is when they don't know what the sources of their tension really are and they don't know how to eliminate them. So I have a free, it's totally free, online training masterclass for you. It's called Total Guitar Playing Tension Control. It's about an hour long, okay? So say goodbye to tension today and experience a lifetime of bigger, better, faster, and easier guitar gains. In this free training I have for you, I reveal how to improve your guitar technique, speed, and fluency much faster. How? Well, first, by identifying all 9 types of tension. Number 9 is very damaging. And then showing you exactly how to overcome all of them so that you can finally get on the fast track to playing guitar the way that you want without tension ruining all your attempts to play with better phrasing and better speed and better technique. Now, during this video masterclass, you will discover how many of the 9 types of tension you have and how to eliminate them one by one. And you'll actually eliminate, or at least severely reduce, all 9 sources of tension by the time this free masterclass ends, okay? So you'll also be able to practice and play your guitar in a new way so that tension never creeps its way back into your playing and prevents you from progressing the way you want. And there's so much more in this. I can't list it all here. We would be here all day talking about it, okay? But the point is, this masterclass will help you open up and unlock potential that you have, but is being held back by the fact that there is tension that's gone unresolved. It happens with most all guitar players. So for a limited time, not forever, but for a limited time, this is totally free to you. No strings attached. Go to tomhess.net/total-tension-control. You'll be glad that you did.